South Korea is set to approve a fourth budget to cushion the economic impact of COVID-19. And both sides of the political aisle have agreed on a $6.5 billion package. It's now just waiting formal approval. Now, this budget focuses on helping small business owners who'll benefit by more than $3 billion. It includes cash handouts and grants for businesses that have been hit the hardest. Now, the aim is to keep close to 1.2 million people in work. Over the four budgets, more than $55 billion has gone to COVID-19 relief measures. The first budget, costing $9.5 billion, committed to funding quarantine, small business and low-income households. The next was worth $10 billion. It was used to fund cash payments to all households. The third budget was the largest, worth nearly $30 billion US. It focused mainly on preventing job losses. But as Lim Yoon-suk reports, many small businesses have folded even before government aid reaches them.
Before the COVID-19 pandemic, people would line up outside this popular chicken joint in Myeongdong. Now it's all but empty. And the restaurant manager says it has been like this for months.
지금 상황 매우 심각하죠. 장사도 잘 안 되고 손님도 없고 많이 힘들죠. 뭐 하루 매출 한 1,000만 원, 뭐 주말에는 1,000만 원 이상 이렇게 벌고 지금은 뭐 많이 팔지도 못하죠. 뭐 100만 원도 못 팔고 많이 힘들어서.
The plunge in sales meant staff had to go.
알바 직원 포함해서 한 30명 정도 됐어요. 근데 지금은 뭐 직원 알바 포함해서 한 5명 정도 쓰고 있고요. 최악입니다. 13년 해봤는데 한 일만 13년 했는데 지금 일은 처음 겪어봐요.
The Myeongdong shopping district used to be a must-visit place for foreign tourists in South Korea. These days, it's been reduced to a ghost town. In Itaewon, another area that was popular among foreigners, signs reading imdae, meaning for rent, can be seen everywhere. The young South Koreans who used to throng this place are also nowhere to be found. They have disappeared since a cluster of coronavirus cases was found at a club in another part of Itaewon. The Korea Food Service Industry Association says that a majority of small restaurants in Seoul and surrounding cities have seen sales plunge by more than 80% after South Korea imposed stricter social distancing rules from late August. Not just for the food and beverage industry, overall the outlook for Asia's fourth largest economy is grim. According to Statistics Korea, some 274,000 jobs were lost last month. The surge in unemployment coincides with new and stricter measures to curb the spread of COVID-19 following a spike in new cases.
지난 4월에 취업자가 많이 감소된 이후로 6개월 연속 감소되어지고 있는데 이거는 지난 2009년 금융위기가 있었던 2009년 1월에서 8월까지 8개월 연속 감소된 이후로 11년 만에 최장기간 지금 감소 형태를 나타내고 있습니다.
The Korea Development Institute, an economic think tank, recently lowered its economic growth forecast for this year to minus 1.1%, down 1.3 percentage points from the 0.2% predicted in May.
8월에 그 확산세가 많이 높아졌는데 이것이 9월에는 조금 잦아든다 이렇게 제가 좀 가정을 했고요. 4, 4분기에도 뭐 코로나19 확산세가 좀 다시 확대될 수도 있겠습니다만 그 경우에도 우리가 사회적 거리두기를 중심으로 생각하면 2단계 이하 다시 말해서 3단계로는 가지 않는 그런 시나리오가 반영되었다고.
Another depressing set of data. Companies filing for bankruptcy across the country reached a record high of 522 in the first 6 months of this year, compared to 485 during the same period last year. The government is hoping South Koreans will strictly observe the social distancing measures so that the latest wave of outbreak can be brought under control soon to allow the full resumption of economic activities before the situation deteriorates further. Lim Yoon-suk, CNA, Seoul.
And for more on this, we're joined by Waqas Adanwala, Asia analyst from the Economist Intelligence Unit. So tell us your opinion then. A large part of the fourth budget is set to centre around small business owners. And why do you think that is?
Well, it's primarily because of the fact that the new restrictions that we've talked about that have been introduced so primarily affect those SMEs or sole traders, the bigger corporations obviously have a bigger cash flow, bigger cash flows coming into the economy. So it's the liquidity that matters for the SMEs, and that's where the struggle is lying. Unfortunately, the SMEs also employ a bigger chunk of people than the bigger corporations do. So if the SMEs fall down, then you see a bigger chunk of people potentially being employed as well.
So there is a current set of tougher restrictions now in the country. How big of an impact is that having on the economy?
Primarily the retail sectors, the ones which are consumer-facing, have been impacted. Tourism is definitely a blip, but that's just not for Korea. That's for most countries across the world. But retail sector, a lot of sectors, because Korea was one of the countries which managed to control coronavirus early on, and its first wave was not as vicious as it has been in some parts of Europe or the US. So Korea was relatively doing far better, but with the new restrictions, it's again such a prolonged idea that you don't know how soon will they end and to what degree will they be able to recover, because the general winter-autumn season brings around the global flu season as well, and that's where the concerns are, that if restrictions don't end anytime soon, they might be facing another wave of coronavirus spreads in the country.
Yeah, as you mentioned, South Korea was heralded as one of the good examples of how to handle the pandemic, but they are battling another wave now. The 4 extra budgets come up to over $50 billion US. Do you think that's going to be enough, or will they need to inject further stimulus?
Unfortunately, I don't think that will be enough. That's also because Korea is a very export-driven economy. So whatever they do can primarily just help the local consumers. Yes, that might prop the domestic consumption, but it might not be able to rectify what's being done on the external demand side. Yes, there are certain silver linings that China is recovering a bit faster than the other economies around the world. But the fact remains that China is not the only market that South Korea exports to. European economies, the US, Japan, they're again still in doldrums. So because of the external outlook, we don't think these 4 budgets will still be sufficient enough to prop up the economy.
So you mentioned there, Mr. Adenwala, the fact that South Korea is an export-driven country, and for the first 20 days of this month, it did in fact return to growth for the first time since March. So I know predictions are going to be tough, but what is your outlook for the rest of the year for South Korea?
Unfortunately, they still remain grim, even on the external side. The figures for the first 20 days of this month were better, yes, but then you also have to look into the fact that they were primarily driven by semiconductors and the autos. That demand was also for the semiconductors driven by China. We see a lot of companies holding up in China, such as Huawei, ahead of new restrictions coming in between US and China. So the next few months, we might actually see those silver linings in South Korea's exports going down as well, potentially. So we see this as a brief silver lining for South Korea, yes, but we don't see this to be sustained for the longer term, or rather, even the medium term for now.
Okay, well, thank you very much for sharing your thoughts with us. Waqas Adenwala, Asia analyst from the Economist Intelligence Unit.